Hi, I'm Rachel Jones, and this is my design project, Problem of Practice. So, when I started to think about a problem that I see as an educator, a few key things popped out to me. The first was motivation, resiliency, especially within math involving literacy. A lot of the times, students look at math and they think it's only a function or a skill that they need to solve. For example, 3 times 2. And when they come across problems that involve reading, a lot of them tend to lose that motivation and resiliency piece. So that really spurred my problem statement, which is students' motivation and resiliency when problem solving math word problems. Looking at the people that this impacts, it's first going to impact educators because they need to make sure that they are creating content that is supporting this motivation and resiliency, especially when looking at math problems that involve reading. It's also going to impact students, especially long term. Math and reading go hand in hand. That is something that students continue to do as they move through the grade levels. And so I consider this not only an impact on students, but long term for them as well. So with my problem of practice, some key theories came to mind that would help my approach within this problem. The first one is Dweck's theory of growth mindset and self theories. Here she discusses the entity theory and the incremental theory. So within the entity theory, students have a fixed mindset and they usually want to be seen as smart. They don't want to make those mistakes. They also tend to have more of that performance goal mindset. And sometimes students can develop that learned helplessness. They tend to think that things are out of their control. Or students that have consistent high success, they don't want to be seen as less, and so they won't attempt a problem if they don't think that they can achieve it successfully. I had a student like this last year who performed very well on all of his math tests. However, when I gave him a further challenge that he really had to grapple with, he really struggled and fell into that learned helplessness because he didn't want to be viewed as anything less. When we're looking at the incremental theory, these are students that want to master challenges, and they typically have more of a learning goal mindset. And that means that they enjoy and they get satisfaction from that process and the effort and really seeking opportunities to improve. And this is where we really want to gear our students more towards that effort piece rather than that performance piece. Dweck also talks about praising effort and not ability. As educators, I think we can fall into both areas within that, whether we're praising ability over effort or vice versa. But her theory really goes to show the importance of and the value of praising effort, not ability. The second theory is the self-determination theory. This is by DC and Ryan. This is where people are driven by a need to know and fulfill 3 needs, which is competence, connection, and autonomy. Within competence, students are wanting to learn skill sets that will help them be successful. For example, if we're looking at multiplication, students are going to want to learn that skill and need to learn that skill in order to be successful within that area. Within connection, students want to be connected not only with others, but be able to be connected to the content that they are interacting with. So that means for us as teachers, finding things that interest them and hold that connection not only with their peers, but with their work as well. Then lastly, with autonomy, making sure that students have that control piece, making sure that they are in control of their work and their learning. Also with self-determination involves extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. So with extrinsic motivators, this is where you need an outside source to be motivated to complete a task. And with this, we found that this can lower self-determination. When you have intrinsic motivators, so you get satisfaction from completing that task. So from being able to work on the process and find ways to improve, that actually boosts your self-determination. Self-determination needs continual work. It is on a continuum. So where some students might feel self-determined in one area, they might not feel that in another area. And so it's an ebb and flow. So making sure that we as educators are working to support students within areas they don't feel confident in to build that self-determination. Also within self-determination, the more you learn and practice, the more skilled and self-determined you become. The third theory is Vygotsky's theory, especially focusing on the zone of proximal development. So his theory looks at learning as a social process. And within the zone of proximal development, this is just outside the reach of what students know. And typically this involves some guidance from an educator or someone else within the classroom supporting, but it helps further their knowledge rather than staying stagnant in one area. It's also not too far out of their ability to where they completely shut down. Also within his theory, we're looking at scaffolding, so making sure that you are leveling out the content for your students. That way they can gain that confidence and self-determination as they move forward. His theory also involves learning through play and imagination. So these three theories helped inform my problem in a variety of ways. Looking at Dweck's theory with growth mindset, her theory informed me that students need to develop an incremental or learning goal view, especially when they are reading and solving math problems. They also need to be willing to grapple with the math problem rather than falling into that learned helplessness. So this means really looking at the math problem and breaking it down to make sure that they are really trying to take in all the information that they can and staying motivated throughout that problem. Looking at self-determination with DC and Ryan, students need to have an attachment to what they are working on and the information that they're interacting with. And so as educators, we want to make sure that we are creating problems and content that is connecting to them, that makes them want to interact with that problem and want to read and solve that problem. Students also need to feel in control and go at their own pace. And so for us as educators, making sure that we are giving them that space and control to do so. With Vygotsky's, we are looking at students moving into that zone of proximal development. So they are attempting math problems that might just be out of their reach, and students are working with teachers for support if needed. This also informs me that I need to make sure that as an educator, I am building in scaffolds for students to build upon their learning and the understanding of the problem. My approach to addressing this problem has several different areas to it. The first one is working to build a growth mindset for students. I want students to embrace challenges and persist through setbacks. And so as an educator, I can model what that looks like, whether that's me independently modeling what that looks like or having a classroom conversation and showing students how I can persevere through that setback, especially focusing on math, literacy, word problems. Here, I would also break down keywords and the possible complexity that comes with that, and that could involve circling or highlighting keywords that would help me stay motivated in continuing the problem. I would also make sure that as an educator, I am praising effort over ability and accuracy. I'm really wanting to see that motivation and resiliency piece within my students. Another approach to this problem is creating an environment that students feel that they are not judged and they can share their process of learning with others. I want students to be able to have that autonomy piece within their math problems when they go to solve them. Another area, and my favorite area, is making sure that you're using students' zone of proximity and scaffolds when you are creating your content. So, for example, within this problem, I had an idea of creating a series of math problems for students. This is a way to scaffold and assist with varying levels. So Looking at math and solving a word problem, we would have our main question that's being addressed. So that's standard that you're looking at. For example, multiplication. That is the question that students are asked to solve. But then on the back, we would have additional questions for students. And I like to make it fun, and this would be a mild, medium, and spicy. So the way this would work is after that main question, students can then move on to a mild question. And this is where it's the same level as the main one, just with a different storyline and different numbers. So the operation that they're being asked to solve and the function is still the same. It's just repeating that question. Then students can move over to the medium. By doing this twice, where they have the main and then the mild, they're building up that self-confidence and determination to move on to further tasks that will push them even farther. They can move on to the medium question, and so this is building upon complexity based off the first two, slightly pushing students more so. And then if they feel that they're ready, they can go on to the spicy question. And this extends beyond the main standard. And this type of leveling is really fun because it gives students that control to go through the questions at their own pace, and they don't have to complete it. It gives them an opportunity to find their motivation, resiliency, and self-determination within each question. Resolutions for other people that are involved. First, we're looking at our students. So circling and highlighting keywords in a problem, breaking them into steps, making sure that they're labeling their work. This can also help build up that resiliency and motivation when they're able to label out their work to help them understand the problem further. They can also have control of the mild, medium, and spicy questions. Again, they do not have to complete each one. As an educator, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that resiliency and motivation if they keep going. If they feel that they are unsure and they've been pushed too far, that's when they can take a step back. But we really want to build up that sense of motivation, resiliency, and self-determination. Also within students, peer interactions, making sure that they're sharing out their steps and their thinking. Looking at the administrator side, administrators can create professional development days for educators that work on implementing student engagement strategies and a growth mindset, especially when looking at literacy within math. This could also include vertical articulation across grade levels to make sure that you, as an educator, are discussing with educators and bringing all the best ideas together. I would also ask that administrators encourage teachers to value effort and perseverance over performance and accuracy. On the parent side of things, we would encourage self-talk with your child and making sure that, again, you are praising that effort over ability when they are completing a challenging task at home. Looking at the assessment of success, this is a little bit of a twofold here. So on the left-hand side, you have an example of what the main question and those mild, medium, spicy questions are. So this example is showing multiplication. So all students would work and start on that front page, and then if they were ready to move forward, they would then move on to the mild, and if they felt confident with that one, they would move their effort onto the medium and the spicy. So when looking at an assessment for success, I am measuring success as students staying motivated, showing that resiliency piece, especially within word problems. I'm looking at an 80% accuracy within my entire class. And a way that I would do this is I would track their data through a data sheet. So a data sheet can be either on a clipboard or it can be virtually, whether that's on your laptop or on your device that you have as an educator. And the data sheet is displaying students' motivation and resiliency success. And I would measure the success in a few different categories. The first category that I would measure the success is within reading the problem. How are students showing motivation and resiliency and perseverance as they read and break down the problem? Do I see them staying focused? Do I see them circling and highlighting, pulling out the important information and grappling with what the question's asking them? Another category that I would look at is attempting the problem. So are students attempting the problem? Are they staying motivated? Are they rising up to the challenge and going through the process of solving the problem? Whether it's right or wrong, are they going through that process? The third category that I would look at is effort in attempting the other questions. So then moving forward into the mild, medium, and spicy questions. This gives me a variety of data points to utilize, to analyze, and then use for future lessons and pulling back small groups as well. Looking at some future implications and next steps. Some implications would be that some students might have that fixed mindset. So just like how we talked about that self-determination is on a continuum, some students might be going in already with that fixed mindset, and they could possibly fall into that learned helplessness area. And so as teachers, making sure that we are mindful of students that may already or could fall into this fixed mindset. So whether that for us as educators is pulling a small group prior to the lesson getting started, so that way you can be there with that small group, supporting them continuously, as others who have more of the growth mindset work on it on their own, you are able to really target those students that are struggling within that motivation and resiliency piece. Another area for implications are students' involvement in sharing and discussing how they stay motivated. So after students complete this activity and complete the lesson, being able to give them an opportunity to share with their peers how they stay motivated. I think a lot of times students really value hearing what their peers have to say. And so if they stay motivated different from another student, then they're able to take all that information in and apply it in future lessons on ways to stay motivated and ways to persevere. Next steps that we as educators can look at is supporting students who display a fixed mindset. So again, pulling that small group, whether that's prior as the lesson's getting started, or even as you see it start to arise within the lesson. Another next step would be a separate data sheet that's displaying accuracy. So we have our assessment of success looking at the motivation and resiliency. You could also create a data sheet that is looking at the accuracy piece. So this would involve me looking at that main question and looking through and seeing who did get the main question correct and who didn't. I can also use the mild, medium, and spicy questions to then see what students completed all of them, completed 2 of them, completed 1 of them, to see how they're performing there, which can also in turn help me with small groups. So this is another data sheet that can also be another way to drive my instruction and drive my small groups, because then I'm able to target that accuracy too. Another piece is that data drives appropriate leveled small groups. Again, this doesn't have to just be within accuracy. Because I'm utilizing my assessment of success within motivation and resiliency, I can then use those data points to pull small groups together to work with students that might have more of that fixed mindset, or to work with students that were on the in-between. They stayed motivated when they were reading, but they struggled when they started applying and working on the problem, or whether that's moving on to additional problems. This data sheet can help me when I'm applying it to students, not only accuracy, but also motivation as well. Below here are my references. And thank you so much.